how did you get to meet the extraordinary, slightly zany and eccentric character who is Bernd Capitan?
It was a strange coincidence. I happened to be going to Essen for an autograph signing. I did a couple of movies that are, I guess, commercial successes, and so they have these weekends of horror and so forth. And so they were bringing me to Essen, and I thought, well, since I'm going all the way to Germany, why don't I look for a city that's, kind of fun to vacation in for a few days before Halloween or around Halloween and see what it's like. And then I just happened to be talking to a friend of mine, Frances Fisher, who is an actress, and she said, oh, you're going to Germany. I know a man who runs a film acting school there in Cologne. And I was trying to decide between Cologne and Bonn, and she said, go to Cologne and look up Bernd Capitan. So I was just about to cast Frances Fisher in a film that I directed called Pandora's Box, and I sent Bernd an email, and I never expected to hear back from him. And he said, please come and visit our school, and would you be interested in teaching our students? And I said, absolutely, I would love it. So I came in November. I think it was All Saints' Day, because it was November 1st. And then I got to meet Bernd and his lovely wife, Christina, and we hung out and had a good time, and I worked with the kids, and it was really good. Yeah.
And what do you think that, first of all, was special about the acting school, and what do you think they need to learn, as we all need to learn as human beings and actors? What do you think they have, and what do they need?
Well, first of all, by the sheer fact that he took a chance with this American actor from New York City that has done some movies, and and I've been on Broadway, and I've done a lot of theater in addition to a lot of film and television, that he had the courage to open up his school and take a chance and say, well, if the guy's no good, I guess my students will figure it out. And pretty much that's the way that it is the students tell you. I mean, to teach is to learn. They really tell you whether or not you know what you're doing. And it's the same thing with performing in front of an audience. If you're not very interesting, you're going to feel their attention drift away, and they're going to start thinking about, what's at the laundromat or whatever for tonight. I haven't seen one laundromat in Cologne. Maybe because it's raining all the time. I don't know.
It's self-washing here.
Yeah, you just step outside
and
a
little detergent, and we go out into
But that's how it happened, and I really enjoyed the students here because they just are not afraid to take a chance. They're willing to get out there and make fools of themselves. And if you have that kind of courage, you can't help but have a platform for success.
And I mean, you talked about learning so much from teaching, even things that you instinctively know, having to break them down and talk about them to someone who's uninitiated. How complex is that? And as you say, how much did you learn from that in the process?
Well, you're always learning. I mean, no matter whether it doesn't even matter if you want to learn. It doesn't even matter if you're in the mood to learn. Life is going to teach you anyway, so you may as well pay attention. The fact is that I think specialty or forte is in Shakespeare. That's what I do differently than most other teachers. I understand verse, and I understand language, and I understand how to make it sound beautiful so that it sounds like music. And his students were very attracted by that, I think. And it is certainly going to accelerate their sense of craft, isn't it? They're going to be much better actors, and already are, by the time they're finished this play. So if you're going to do this thing, okay, let's say you're crazy enough to be an actor, you may as well get good at it because there's a lot of people that want to do it. So what is going to set you apart from everyone else? And being able to do Shakespeare is definitely going to set you apart. And it's, you know, the old classical music theory. If you can play Beethoven on the piano, then what's it going to be like to play Queen? I mean, although Queen is, some of it's very complex, but nonetheless, it's a piece of cake for a classically trained musician.
You talk about the melody and rhythm of Shakespeare. How
Mm-hmm.
do you marry the need for the rhythm and the depth of sound and intonation of the language with the inherent meaning of the language?
Yeah, well, actually, the two things are the same. You know, if you know what you're saying, the meaning will evoke itself. You know, to be or not to be, that is the question. You know, if you know how to say it, it will take care of itself. So the acting kind of, you don't really have to do any acting. You just have to speak the words properly, really. And breathing is not so much in your chest and in your lungs as it is in your mind. If you're very excited or possessed, obsessed about something, you're going to find a lot more oxygen in there than you thought you might have had otherwise because you're excited about it. And you might try to do that again and not have as much because you're not emotionally, you know, committed for whatever reason. So what we have in Two Gentlemen of Verona being done here at the Imhoff Theater is a production where in about 16 days, 17 days, we whipped together a full course production of a 5-act comedy by Shakespeare, probably his second or third play, we're not really sure, but an early one for certain, where you could spot the genius and you could see the flaw. You know, sometimes we're not really sure where we are in this play, which is kind of funny, but so we just changed it and we just said, okay, you know, we're in Verona, we're going to Milan, no matter what the script says, because, you know, we have to put it someplace. I don't think he would have minded. And you can see a little bit of the journeyman playwright in Shakespeare in this play, which is also something that I think is interesting because he was just such a genius. I mean, I don't know. I think Shakespeare invented us, really. But for actors to rise to the challenge of Shakespeare, especially since it's not their first language, and to be so young, and the commitment that this requires it takes a different kind of courage. Let me put it that way. It takes a special kind of courage. And that's what I think if, you know, I were a director here in Cologne or a producer and I were looking for young actors, that's what I'd be looking for, is somebody with, well, there's two things. I look for guts and I look for this. If they have guts and they have smarts, then I want them in my movie or I want them in my play. Because, you know, they've got to do something exciting to make people watch. Smarts because, you know, a smart actor is one that makes choices. A smart actor is one that reads the material and uses his imagination to create the truth, you know, based upon the feeling, you know, that's involved. But they're really a great bunch of kids, I got to tell you. I mean, there has been absolutely no ego and no kind of I business the entire time. It's all been about the other, which is really quite rare, you know.
You see that they're absolutely cheering for each other,
right?
If not outwardly,
that's right.
You can see they're willing each other to success. Which is very
that's right, and it's very special. And I'll tell you something: it's also smart because you don't get successful by pushing the other person down. You become successful by helping another guy out, you know. And the great sages have known this from the beginning of time. It's not what you get, it's what you give. And they seem to have latched onto that. And obviously, you know, because of Bernd. I mean, where else would they get it from? He's the leader, so that's my conclusion.
Madam, Good evening to your ladyship.
I thank you for the music, gentlemen.
The difference in acting in front of a camera, even though we're going to be doing both today, but acting in front of a camera on a stage is quite different. The old platitude, sometimes less is more in front of the camera in particular. But would you say go less or go more on stage?
Yeah, this is a great misconception. You know, people think, well, I'm acting in front of the camera, I have to make it smaller. You know, that's not really true. The only difference is the audience changes. The size of the audience goes from this to this. That's all that changes. It still has to be full and committed and complete. And if you overdo something, it doesn't make any difference if the audience is this big or this big. You're still overdoing it. So I think the important thing is to learn how to get, in the case of the camera, to get the camera to like you. You know, that's really the key. It's like if you were, you know, trying to get a date, and you were trying to get a date with an inanimate object, what would you do?
Some people do, you know.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, it's showing, I suppose, your charisma and being interesting. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, of course, if you look back on any relationship, you know, when you first started to court this person, you put your best, you know, foot forward. You're like, you know, you're always dressed nicely. You're always saying the right thing. It's the same principle, essentially. You know, you're trying to get someone to like you. That's a very specific action, isn't it, to try to get you to like me? Acting, of course, is much more complex than that. That's one action of hundreds of possibilities of actions. The important thing is how you make the other person feel.
If you could go back and talk to the young individual before you knew anything really, what would you say to yourself? What advice would you give to yourself?
Okay, there's two things. The first one is everybody gets hung up on this, what's called profiling, okay? Profiling is, you know, oh, what type am I? You know, am I a commercial type? Am I a leading man? Am I a character? Yeah, that is a non-existent question. I mean, of course, there are certain limitations, but you read a script or you watch a movie and you see what part you identify with and what person you see yourself as, and that's who you're probably going to be cast as. You know, and to limit yourself otherwise is foolish. And then the other thing would be to read Shakespeare. You know, Shakespeare knows the answer to everything, you know. If to see ourselves as others see us, you know, that's a throwaway line. I am a feather for each wind that blows. Another, you know, that's a throwaway line. I mean, people today couldn't think of that if they spent, you know, a week trying to write it. There's wisdom in there. There is knowledge in there. And there is finally peace. You know, because actors have a tendency to get very like, oh my God, you know, what is this? You know, Jimmy Cagney said acting is planting your feet and telling the truth. I mean, there's something to that. You know, and if you don't tell the truth in life, I think it's kind of difficult to expect to be believed on stage, I guess. You know, so that's one hint.